All right, Dead by Daylight classroom, it is time to turn in your work, and we are going to get right to work grading what you've done. So welcome in, I am your teacher, Das Food, and today what I want to do is I want to look at every chapter Dead by Daylight has ever released, and I want to give it a grade from F to A+. F being, this was terrible. Did you even work on this? How does this happen? And then A+ being, hey, whoa, there's almost nothing wrong with this. Now, one important thing to note, and this is a minor caveat, but obviously even if a chapter gets an F, it's so hard to say that anything is ever, completely terrible, completely without value. And then if something gets an A+, that's not to say you can't have a minor gripe here or there. It's just to say that it came about as close to perfection as I could expect something to realistically do. And before we do get going, I want to make one more little caveat here, and that's that I tried to combine the objective with the subjective. The objective, that which is, undeniable, that it is true, it's factual, and then the subjective, that being my opinion. So I tried to kind of meet in the middle of the two because sometimes, we're going to look at some things, and I don't want to just be my opinion, but obviously it's my video, so it is kind of my opinion, but as always, because I know somebody's gonna think I'm a big dumb dummy, so let me know down in the comments below if you disagree with my grades. Now, there are 31 chapters at time of recording, and we're like a week away from hearing what chapter 32 is going to be, so we're not going to waste any time. We're gonna get right into these, and we're going to start with The Last Breath. Now, for every chapter that I cover, we're going to talk about when it came out, what characters it came with, what maps it came with, what perks it came with, and then I'm just gonna kind of riff on it a little bit. So this one was released in August 18th of 2016, which, oh my gosh, wow, Dead by Daylight. Sometimes I forget how old you are. And I don't even say that to be mean. I think that's incredible. I think it's awesome that the game has been going this long. It's really, really impressive that if the game keeps going at the rate it's been going, it will reach legal drinking age. That's crazy to me. Now, anyway, talking about The Last Breath, we kind of get off on an interesting foot here because the characters released in this chapter were the nurse and Nia Carlson. The maps were the Crotus Print Asylum realm was brought in, and at the time, all it had was the Disturbed Ward map, which is the one with the big building in the middle that no killer in their right mind would ever go towards. As for perks, we got A Nurse's Calling, Strider, Thanatophobia, Balanced Landing, Streetwise, and Urban Evasion. So let's talk about this chapter. What is the good? What's the bad? Well, the thing we have to lead with is that we got the most powerful, possibly too powerful, killer in the game with this one, that being the nurse. We did get what I would consider to be a generally popular survivor, though in Asimov's most recent video, Nia did not do well in the polling, so maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe people do not like Nia. As far as the perks are concerned, Nurse's Calling is a fun perk. Balanced Landing was awful for old Haddonfield, but now it's generally irrelevant. And then the map itself is rough. So what are we left with here? We're left with a chapter where I think the highs are not very high and the lows are pretty darn low. So I don't know where each individual member of my audience is going to fall on this, but I think the nurse is a problem. I think she's been a problem for a very long time, and I think she needs a very severe nerf. With all of that in mind, I can't give this one a very good grade. I am sorry, Last Breath. I am just not that impressed with your work. You get a D. After that, we got one that they called it the Halloween chapter, and this was back when it used to be the blank chapter instead of just Halloween, which is what they would kind of later go on to do with the licensed chapters. But yeah, this one's exactly what you think it is. It's the one that brought the Shape, Michael Myers, and Laurie Strode into the game, as well as Haddonfield, which is a realm with only one map, that being Lampkin Lane. This one came out in October of 2016, October 25th to be specific, so really close to Halloween, which, I mean, honestly, pretty cool timing with that one. And regarding the perks, we got Dying Light, Play with Your Food, Stabiffle, Decisive Strike, Objective Obsession, and Soul Survivor. So this was a massive chapter for the game's popularity. Michael's power is still unique and cool, if somewhat weak and possibly outdated, but yeah, okay, it's cool, but weak. Speaking of weak, this version of Laurie is a letdown. I know they couldn't get the rights to Jamie Lee Curtis, but if they were going to kind of blank slate it, I wish they'd done better than this. Decisive Strike and Objective Obsession have both been really gross at certain points, and honestly, so was Save the Best for Last for a hot minute, but all are fine now, and Stabiffle remains one of my absolute favorite perks. Haddonfield is still not necessarily great to play on because it's got this issue where if killers really protect the 3-gen they're given, it's miserable for survivors, but if they play nice and they actually have to loop the other side of the map, it's miserable for killers. So it's not in a great place right now, but damn dude, it is in so much better of a place than it used to be. Oh, and one thing I did want to mention from the outset, but I guess I'll just kind of drop it in here now, is I mentioned this being a massive chapter for the game's popularity, and that is something I'm going to consider with these. If it was healthy for the greater community as a whole, I'm going to let that work towards something's favor. So, despite the downsides of the Halloween chapter, overall, I'm going to give it a solid B. Next, we got Of Flesh and Mud. This was the chapter that introduced the Hag and Ace Visconti, but perhaps most important of all, this was the chapter that gave us Hex, Devour Hope, Hex, Ruin, and Hex, Third Seal. That's right, this was the one that brought hexes into the game, which was a pretty big new mechanic. And by the way, I should have mentioned for the last one, the Halloween chapter brought the obsession mechanic into the game, so that did factor into its score. I didn't forget it when I was giving it its score, but I didn't mention it just then. So yeah, hexes were brought in with Of Flesh and Mud, which was released in December 8th of 2016. Obviously, it came with Hag and Ace, as already mentioned, and it came with the Backwater Swamp Realm, which I gotta be honest, nobody likes playing on it, but being from Mississippi, it's just like looking outside for me. So honestly, there is some comfort in that. Unlike most of the realms that we've already talked about, this one actually released with 2 maps, those being the Pale Rose and the Grim Pantry. And then I mentioned the Hag's 3 perks, but then Ace also came out with Ace in the Hole, Open-Handed, and Up the Ante. So when I look at this chapter, I think that the addition of Hex perks was awesome. But it's fair to note that Ruin was really gross for a while, and now it's just basically entirely useless, which is the life, that's what so many powerful perks go through, right? Unfortunately, that's just kind of how behavior does their balancing, and until that gets better, we're going to have a lot of stories like this. Ace's perks are notoriously bad, though I will admit that Open-Handed has its uses. If you pair it with Kindred, it is so cool getting that kind of info on the killer. It really can help your team out in a big way. So I'm not going to say that all of his are terrible, but man, Up the Ante and Ace in the Hole are just not going to do a whole lot for you. I'm not sure anyone likes the swamp maps, but I would say that Pale Rose is better than the Grim Pantry. I think that one thing it offers that's kind of underrated is survivors have to decide which gens they want to do, because they can 3-gen themselves, but it's only if they're really careless with it. So I think that it's one where you kind of do have a fun, almost cat and mouse game. There's a little bit more strategy that goes into it. Grim Pantry's just rough. I don't think anyone really likes that map. But let me know down below if you do, because I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair. But then, as far as the characters are concerned, Ace has a good character design that lends itself to fun cosmetics. I don't really have a main in Dead by Daylight as far as survivors are concerned, so for me personally, I do find myself playing a lot of Ace just because I really enjoy his cosmetics. And then Hag is a love-or-hate character, and I kinda hate her, unfortunately. But I will say that unlike some of the characters I hate, I see where people like Hag. I really do. She's just not for me. So overall, this one, let's give it a C+. C+, this could have been a lot worse. Next, we got the game's first ever paragraph. This one was called Left Behind, and it was released in March of 2017 on the 8th day. I should have said March 8th. And it came out with Bill Overbeck from Left 4 Dead, as well as some cosmetics for a couple of other survivors, but those aren't really going to factor in here too much. Though it is worth noting that they came out at a time really before cosmetics. This was before the cosmetic shop that was added at the time of the Clown and Kate's release. So this was before all that, so if you wanted cosmetics, there was a time where you had to actually buy them through the Steam store or, something equivalent on your console, which is kind of funny. You're like, it takes me back to a different time in the game. But anyway, so Bill was only one character, but he came out with some pretty good perks. So he came out with Borrowed Time, Left Behind, and Unbreakable. Now, one of these things is not like the other, right? This one, so Left Behind's a bad perk. It's a bad perk. However, I will say Borrowed Time and Unbreakable are absolutely incredible, even though BT's not as good as it used to be. So I would say that BT earned its place because for so long, it was the best way to combat tunneling, which, I mean, it was basically something you would see run on all 4 survivors in almost every game for years. So you can't really say it was a bust of a perk, even if nowadays you just don't really see it anymore. And Unbreakable is still a great anti-slugging tool. And really, there's just not a lot to complain about here. Paragraphs tend to be kind of sparse as is, and when it's a survivor paragraph as opposed to a killer, it's even more sparse. So having Bill in the game is awesome. Hitting on 2 of the 3 perks is admirable. There's really not a lot more they could have done better with this one, so I give it an A-. Next, we got the 5th chapter, or really 4th chapter, because again, paragraphs and all that, but the next chapter was Spark of Madness. This came out May 11th, 2017, and brought the Doctor and Feng Min into the game. And it also brought the Larry's Memorial Institute realm, which to this day only has one map, that being the Treatment Theater. And I know just by mentioning the Treatment Theater, some of you got excited and some of you got really, really just dejected and nervous, because like, oh, that map. It really is a polarizing map, and it's interesting to see where people fall on it. Regarding the perks, we got Monitor and Abuse, Overcharge, and Overwhelming Presence for the Doctor, while we got Alert, Lithe, and Technician for Feng Min. Much like the Treatment Theater itself, this is bound to be a divisive chapter, but I do generally like it. Feng is a massive hit with the fan base, and I really like the Doctor. He's a real bastard, and it makes him fun to play as. I really like his little giggles when he hits people and all that. He's just one of the true psychopaths in the game, and honestly, if you're looking to get immersed, he's a great place to start. Now, that being said, the map does kind of make me want to cry, but it's not as bad as some other maps, and it's actually fair. Some people are going to hate that I say this, but it's fairly balanced for the most part, especially when compared to the really unbalanced maps. So, all right, we'll call it kind of a push there, but it's sad that every perk not named Lithe in this chapter is pretty bad. I mean, except for, I guess, Monitor and Abuse, you know, Michael's the world over, or Shapes the world over, thanking you for that one, but pretty rough batch of perks, which honestly, I think this one would have snuck into the A range, but because the perks were so bad and the Treatment Theater so divisive, I'm gonna give it a B+, but I do like this chapter. After that, we got a Lullaby for the Dark that came out in July 27th of 2017, and that one came with the Huntress and David King, two of the more popular characters in the game's history. So it also came with the Red Forest realm and the map Mother's Dwelling, which is not one of the more popular things in the game's history. All my homies hate Mother's Dwelling. It's a terrible place. As for perks, we got Beast of Prey, Hex, Huntress Lullaby, and Territorial Imperative on the killer side, and then survivor side we got Dead Hard, No Mither, and We're Gonna Live Forever. This is a chapter of competing extremes. Huntress's power is wonderfully designed, and David's aesthetic is really solid. And I also think that No Mither is a great perk for the game, and We're Gonna Live Forever was extremely important for a long time, and really, if you're asking me, I think it should be changed back. I know they're not going to do it, but I liked it the way it used to be, where every time you would unhook a survivor, you would get that 25% bonus to blood points. It encouraged altruism, which, I mean, that was kind of a win for everybody. On the other hand, again, on the other side of the extreme here, Huntress's perks are absolute garbage. Mother's Dwelling is one of them. It may be the worst map in the game. I hate this map. I can't stand it, and I can't believe that they went through it and did a passover, or a pass-through, I should say. They reworked it, and it's still terrible. In fact, it may be worse. I don't know how that's possible. And then, of course, with this chapter, you have to talk about Dead Hard, which was as divisive as it was overpowered for something like 6 years. So yeah, grading this chapter is pretty difficult because I do appreciate the highs, but man, the lows were extremely low, and I think Dead Hard alone really hurts this one. So overall, I give this a C+. It could have been better, but hey, at the same time, it could have been a lot worse too. After that, we got the next paragraph. This one was Leatherface, not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but just Leatherface. And with this one, it released on September 14th of 2017. We were given the Cannibal, better known as Bubba, better known as Leatherface, better known as the guy who's going to take you to the basement and never leave. He did not come with a map. And then as far as perks are concerned, we got Barbecue and Chili, Franklin's Demise, and Knockout. So when we talk about this map, it's important to note that it was kind of famously rushed, and I do think it shows in a lot of ways. Bubba's initial power was undercooked, like his chili. His add-ons were mostly just the hillbillies, and the chapter was very thin on content overall. It also brought the collectible mask fiasco, which it was a cool idea, and it went down an unfortunate alley, so I don't really want to hold it against the devs because I would like to see them try things like that in the future, but there's no doubt that that one did not end up working as intended. When we talk about the perks, I would say that Barbecue and Chili, I mean, obviously it was huge for many years because it would give you that massive blood point boost when the game was pretty much at its most grindy, and it's still good today. You still see people running Barbecue and Chili even though they took off the blood points, and again, I do think they should add those back, but they're not going to. Franklin's and Knockout still have their uses. Not great perks necessarily, but they're fun perks, and that's usually what I look for. Overall, I would say I look at this one and I think that time and updates have been kind to this chapter, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. C-. After the Bubba paragraph, we got a full chapter. That one was A Nightmare on Elm Street. This was another Halloween release. This one came out in October 26th of 2017, and it gave us Freddy Krueger, the Nightmare, and Quentin Smith, who obviously was a character from the 2010 reboot. It also gave us the Springwood realm and the Battle Elementary map, which originally it was just one map, now it's 5 maps, and I'm just gonna say, shoot me now. I hate I hate this realm. I hate these maps. Oh my gosh, I hate them. And you know, what's unique about them is I kind of hate them on both sides. I hate them more as a killer, but I don't really like them either way. For perks, we got Blood Warden, Fire Up, Remember Me, Pharmacy, Vigil, and Wake Up. And look, longtime viewers likely expect me to give this one just a cold F and move on, but not so fast. Yes, Freddy is weak, but here's the thing. I loved Freddy's original power. It's a shame they changed it, though I know I'm in the minority here. I don't know, I really enjoyed old Freddy. Also, I have no hesitation in saying that all 6 perks from this chapter are actually decently fun and occasionally useful. That said, I do hate the pharmacy change. It was one of my favorite perks before they fixed it, and I used to run it pretty regularly, and I'm very sad that I can't do that anymore. The interesting approach they took to character designs here, by the way, for this chapter, it was just a real lose-lose situation. Obviously, nobody was going to be happy to have Jackie Earle Haley Freddy over Robert Englund Freddy, and I know behavior could not actually change that themselves, but look, it was always going to be an unpopular choice. And then the issue, I think, for a lot of it is that people fell in love with Goblin Quentin, and then when they made him handsome, you just kind of split the player base even further on Quentin, so kind of unfortunate there. And then yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I hate the Springwood realm, and it makes me want to DC every time I load in. I hate it, and it hates me. Fight me, Ohio. This one gets a D. We can finally wash out the bad taste of the last few chapters really, and go to one that I'm rather high on, that being the 9th chapter, Saw. So Saw came out in January 23rd of 2018, and it gave us the Pig and Detective Tapp. For maps, we got yet another new realm. There was a time where they were just popping out realms left and right. And this one is the Gideon Meat Plant realm, which seems kind of interesting that they would make that the name of the realm, but whatever. I guess they don't know the name of the city in the Saw films because it's never specified, so that's fair. Anyway, it came with the game map, and then it came with the perks Hangman's Trick, Make Your Choice, Surveillance, Detective's Hunch, Stakeout, and Tenacity. This one is going to do a little better than you might think it will in the grading process, because I actually rather like the meat plant. Even though, yes, it's a map designed to make the clown cry, and I am a clown main, and yes, Nurse does kind of ruin it, but despite that, I still generally like the map. Several solid perks in this chapter, most especially Detective's Hunch, which is just chef's kiss. Make Your Choice is a profoundly healthy perk that actually discourages tunneling, and we don't have a lot of those, especially not on the killer side. And then Pig actually has a unique and engaging power, and yeah, sure, there are kinks to iron out, but it's mostly pretty good even if she's not super meta. When I look back on this, I think it was an extremely fun take on Saw, and even though I'll always wish it used a cooler character than Tapp, like, oh, I don't know, Detective Carey? Please? Can we please get Detective Carey in the game? I still really, really like this chapter. And maybe you're going to say I'm being crazy here, but I give it an A. Speaking of chapters that you're going to think I'm overrating, up next we have Curtain Call, which came out in June 12th, 2018, and was actually, by the way, the first ever chapter I was here for the release of. I was here when people were like, oh, the killer's gonna be the Ringmaster, the Ringmaster. He did not end up being the Ringmaster. He ended up being my main, the Clown, and he released with Kate Denson, who statistically speaking is probably your main. As far as maps are concerned, this one added on to the Crotus Prin realm and gave us the Father Campbell's Chapel, which, okay, we'll get to how I feel about the map in a minute. But anyway, perk-wise, Bamboozle, Colorophobia, Pop Goes the Weasel, Boil Over, Dance With Me, and Windows of Opportunity. So, as a clown main, I'm obviously biased on this one, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm not. But, hear me out, this was a genuinely awesome chapter. The map isn't horrible. Kate is mega popular, and we got several fun perks out of this one. Windows, Pop, and Bamboozle have all had their moments in the sun. The real issue here, I think, is Clown, who many people just seem to kind of passionately hate. I do think that he's just kind of like John Carpenter's The Thing or Star Wars Connect's Han Solo song, in that he's a masterpiece that's just not appreciated in its time. So as time goes on, I hope more people start to like the clown. But I mean, at the end of the day, I love the clown and I love this chapter, so I'm going to give this an A-. After Curtain Call, we got Shattered Bloodline. That one came out September 18th of 2018 and released with The Spirit, Adam Francis, and the Yamaoka Estate Realm, which at the time only had the family residence. It came with the perks Hex Haunted Ground, Rancor, Spirit Fury, Autodidact, Deliverance, and Diversion. So much like the last time, the big knock on this one for me is the killer, because look, the nurse, not the nurse, I mean Freudian in some ways, but the spirit is still strong. But she spent many years absolutely busted. And even after her nerf, damn, she's still not very fun to face, given that she's essentially a 50-50 simulator. You have to pick if you think she's going to appear on side A or side B of the palette. And that doesn't really allow for skillful play. All three of her perks were awesome though, and Adam brought my favorite perk to the game with Autodidact, so I mean obviously that's going to influence the score somewhat. And honestly, there's really not a boring perk to be found in this chapter, so I do congratulate them on that. The family residence map is controversial, but I think is better than people give it credit for, even if maybe it's a little too easy as a killer to 3-gen on that one. And honestly, I look back on this one and I say that it would have gotten an even better grade had they given Adam some more consistent and quality cosmetics, because they really just don't seem to care about Adam, and that's a shame. In the end, I give this one a B+. Moving on, we come to Darkness Among Us, which came out in December 11th of 2018 and released with The Legion, Jeff Johansson, and the Ormond Realm, which to this day still only has one map, that being the Mount Ormond Resort. As far as perks are concerned, we got Discordance, Iron Maiden, Mad Grit, Aftercare, Breakdown, and Distortion. So I struggle to think of a more popular killer than Legion. So obviously this chapter resonated with a lot of people. Jeff is also great, and you know, this was around the time when Behavior's survivor designs really started to kick it up a notch. Discordance and Distortion, they're alright, but the perks were kind of weak. I mean, the chapter as a whole kind of had weak perks, not a whole lot to go off of, but again, I do think Discordance in particular is rather good. Ormond is a beautiful map for sure, but it's also very brutal for most killers. Shout out Blight, Hillbilly, the ones who can get around quickly. Those are going to enjoy this map. But again, I look at so much of this through the lens of a clown main, and it's like, oh, shoot me dead. Shoot me dead. Even with that being said, though, I actually still like Ormond. I think it's just such a beautiful map. I'm usually kind of happy to play on it. I think that later perk buffs and power reworks did a lot to elevate this chapter, and it's worth noting that Joey alone raises the grade here. He's objectively the best member of Legion, and I'm not going to pretend like he's not. And while I am generally high on this chapter, I also don't want to forget about Legion's numerous game-breaking bugs over the years, because they have just kind of had this habit of breaking the game, so I can't put them in the A range, but I'm going to give them a nice B+. Next was lucky number 13, and for that we got Demise of the Faithful, which came out in March 19th of 2019, gave us The Plague, Jane Romero, the Temple of Purgation, which, the Temple of Purgation was the map, and it was on the Red Forest realm, by the way. With the perks, we got Corrupt Intervention, Dark Devotion, Infectious Fright, Head On, Solidarity, and Poised. So I adore this chapter. Plague is a great killer with both an awesome look and a unique power that changes how survivors have to play the game. Temple of Purgation is a really solid map that nobody really seems to have a problem with, and then Infectious Fright was an issue for a while when it would be paired with Nurse, bit of a theme in it, but now it's much healthier and I really like the perk. Head On is also great as long as it's not being used on the Dead Dog Saloon, because I feel like I'm going to overuse the phrase shoot me, but yeah, wow, that can be a lot to deal with. But either way, it's a cool perk that encourages aggressive gameplay, and I do enjoy that. Jane, on the whole, is kind of hit or miss. I don't particularly care for her, but she does have a very vocal fan base, so it's not to say that nobody cares for her. When we look back, we see that we had fun perks, a great killer, and a solid map. So that all comes together to make this chapter special, even if the survivor was kind of forgettable. So I give this one a well-deserved A. After that, we got Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is exactly what you would expect. It was a paragraph where we only got Ashley J. Williams. This came out April 2nd, 2019, and it came with the perks Buckle Up, Flip Flop, and Metal Amend. So another paragraph, and this one just means the world to me. Having Ash Williams in Dead by Daylight is debatably the coolest license they've gotten, even if seeing Ash just in the role of the hunted rather than ever being the hunter is extremely strange, to me at least. I can't gush enough over the fact that they got Bruce Campbell to voice Ash, even if he's not given much to do. The perks here, unfortunately, are pretty bad, and Metal nearly ruined the game when it launched, so this one's not all that impactful, but hey, it is undeniably groovy. I give it a B-. We followed that paragraph up with another paragraph, but this one was actually the anniversary paragraph, so they promoted it to chapter, even though all it is Ghostface, which came with the Ghostface in June 18th, 2019. And Ghostface was launched with Furtive Chase, I'm All Ears, and Thrilling Tremors. So another paragraph, yes. But naturally, killer paragraphs are going to be a tad more impactful, so it's understandable. Ghostface was super weak in the PTB, and his detection mechanic is still pretty janky, but Ghosty has an awesome power, and I think he's the game's coolest stealth killer. Getting the Fun World version of the character instead of the Scream version has actually proven to be both a gift and a curse. So I'm All Ears is really cool and Thrilling Tremors is extremely useful, but that being said, Furtive Chase is so bad, I would actually say it's insultingly bad, and it should be incinerated at the dev's earliest convenience. This qualifies as a good, but it's good, but not necessarily great content, right? So it was close to greatness, but it didn't quite reach it. So I'm going to give it a B+. Moving on, we get Stranger Things, which released September 17th, 2019. This one came with the Demogorgon, Steve Harrington, Nancy Wheeler, and the Hawkins National Laboratory realm, which came with the Underground Complex. As far as perks are concerned, we got quite a few for this one, so deep breaths. We got Cruel Limits / Claustrophobia, Mindbreaker / Fearmonger, Surge / Jolt, Babysitter and or Guardian, Better Together and or Situational Awareness, Camaraderie and or Kinship, Fixated / Self-Aware, Inner Strength / Inner Healing, and finally Second Wind, which is now known as Renewal. So not only were there 9 perks, but they all got new names once the property was lost. And again, the property was lost. So what stings most in hindsight is just how good this chapter was. Demogorgon was arguably the most well-balanced killer of all time. Steve looked absolutely amazing, and Nancy, well, she was certainly a part of it, wasn't she? So there's also the matter of the Hawkins lab map, and look, I consistently see people say that the only reason people miss this map is because of nostalgia, and I can't disagree any more strongly than I do. I always liked the map, and I always made a point of mentioning how much I enjoyed it. I know that plenty of people disliked it, but the map had its fans, and I'm tired of hearing people make this argument that, oh, you only miss it because it's something that's gone. No, I enjoyed it when it was here, and I would love to have it back. Speaking of things that were great while they were here, the Scoops Ahoy cosmetic was incredible and made the game better just by being there, just by existing. And finally, lots of perks came out with this one, and out of all of them, Surge and or Jolt was easily the best. So I give this one a very melancholy A. On a happier note, after that, we got Cursed Legacy, which released in December of 2019 and gave us the Oni and Yui Kimura. It also gave us the Sanctum of Wrath, which is another Yamaoka map, probably the less popular of the two, but there's really no telling. And then we also got Blood Echo, Nemesis, Zanshin Tactics, Any Means Necessary, Breakout, and Lucky Break as perks. Nemesis is just a perk right now. We'll get to the killer later. This chapter, when I look at all of it, right? It made me realize how hard it is for a chapter to reach A+ status. So much works in this chapter. Oni is awesome, and so is his power. Yui has debatably the best look of any survivor. Out of the chapter's 6 perks, I'd say Yui's 3 are outright good, and Oni's 3 are all niche, but not inherently terrible. They're not poorly designed. The issue here is the map, which looks really cool, but I generally find it to be kind of rough to play on. So I should dock them points for that, but I'm a biased teacher, so just this once I'm gonna fudge the numbers here. And you know what? Cursed Legacy, good job, A+. And if you think the good times were ending after that, whoo-hoo, this was good. After that, we got Chains of Hate, which came out March 10th, 2020, and gave us the Deathslinger, Zarina Kassir, the Grave of Glenvale realm, which came with the Dead Dog Saloon, and then 6 perks in Dead Man Switch, Gearhead, Hex Retribution, For the People, Off the Record, and Red Herring. And you guys it may not get better than this chapter. Slinger is one of a kind. Zarina is finally getting the love she's always deserved, and Dead Dog is probably my favorite map in the entire game, even though it features daylight, which weren't we supposed to be dead by then? Perk-wise, I really like For the People, Off the Record, and Dead Man Switch, even though if you use Dead Man Switch against me, I'm going to completely flip on it and be a super biased little baby who's like, how dare you use that? Gearhead is really cool after it's buffed too, so really glad that that one's actually a useful perk now. Any complaints about this chapter, like Slinger's old ADS time, feel way too nitpicky to mention now. This is the gold standard of DBD DLC, and it's an easy A+. After that, we got Silent Hill, which came out in June of 2020, and it gave us the Executioner, Pyramid Head, Cheryl Mason, the Silent Hill Realm, which came with the Midwich Elementary School map, and it gave us the perks Deathbound, Forced Penance, Trail of Torment, Blood Pact, Repressed Alliance, and Soulguard. So man, the hits just keep coming. Midwich is an awesome map, and I'm shocked some people really dislike it because I think it's a really cool map. Pyramid Head is really well designed as a killer, and he rewards skillful and calculated play. And then Cheryl. I mean, Cheryl's just kind of cool, you know? That's not to say the chapter's perfect, though. Pyramid Head's add-ons are an abomination, and they actually started a trend of really bad add-ons for several killers. And then the perks in this chapter are pretty awful too, even though I rather like Soulguard. The good definitely outweighs the bad here, but there are some missteps, and for that I'm going to dock it just a little bit and give it an A-. After that, we got Descend Beyond, which came out in September of 2020 and gave us The Blight, Felix Richter, and no map. Get used to me saying that because that's going to be for quite a few of these going forward. As far as perks are concerned, we got Dragon's Grip, Hex Blood Favor, and Hex Undying for The Blight, while Felix came equipped with Built to Last, Desperate Measures, and Visionary. I feel when I look back that this chapter broke the streak of great chapters, but I wouldn't go as far as to say as this chapter is bad. Blight would be a perfectly designed killer, if not for his grossly unbalanced add-ons. Felix has a cool design, and the perks between the two are pretty good, I think. Desperate Measures is a regular in my builds, and actually I also kind of enjoy Visionary, it's fun, and then I also enjoy Undying and Blood Favor. Built to Last has helped me with quite a few tome challenges, so just from a utilitarian standpoint, I'm glad that one's in the game. And then finally, Dragon's Grip is cool in concept, but terribly tough to balance, because you can't just go handing out insta-down ones like that, but I don't know, more often than not, I feel like I take it and it's just totally useless. A minor gripe here, which will kind of hurt the chapter a little, but I feel like Felix's lore I feel like it started the trend of the writers trying just a little bit too hard, which, yeah, I don't know. I mean, is that nitpicky? I don't really like his lore, but I think we'll get a little more into it in a very, very soon chapter, okay? So not having a map hurts this one, but you know, it's mostly because I think the devs were actually on a rare streak of making good maps, so I'm kind of bummed out they stopped when they did, but knowing what lies ahead, maybe that was a small mercy for this chapter. Overall, a couple of misses here and there, but I give this one a solid B. This was a good chapter. After this, we got a Binding of Kin, and I know people are going to have some thoughts on this one. So, Binding of Kin came out in December 1st of 2020. It came with the twins, Elodie Rikoto, and again, no map. Killers were able to use coup de grace, hoarder, and oppression, while survivors were given appraisal, deception, and power struggle. Now, to be upfront about it, I do have a strange love for the twins, but it's not hard to see why people hate this chapter. This was another mapless chapter that also had a killer with a rough aesthetic and a clunky power. It doesn't help that Elodie was another character where the lore just really seemed to miss the mark. I enjoyed when most survivors were everyday people, not super adventurers that would feel at home in an Indiana Jones movie. Power struggle, coup de grace, deception, and oppression are all solid perks, and I don't feel like this chapter gets enough credit for how well it did in that regard. The perks were pretty good. Overall, I feel like this chapter is overhated, but still extremely far from ideal. I give it a C. Of course, the controversy did not end with a Binding of Kin, because right after that we got All Kill, which came out in March 2021 and came with the Trickster, Yunjin Lee, and for the third straight time, no map. This was a year where we were kind of starved for new maps, but I'm not going to hold that against any one chapter more than any others, but it is worth noting by the third straight one without a map, you start to say, like, is everything all right with the map team? They doing all right? So anyway, the perks we got were Hex Crowd Control, No Way Out, Starstruck, Fast Track, Self-Preservation, and Smash Hit. So when reviewing All Kill, let's start with the good, move on to the bad, and then address the highly subjective. So the good. Fast Track, Starstruck, and No Way Out are all awesome perks. Yunjin Lee is one of the coolest survivors in all of Dead by Daylight, and I think she deserves a much larger player base. But then, what's the bad? The bad is that Smash Hit is almost certainly the worst exhaustion perk. And, again, there was no map released for the third straight chapter. That's almost a full year of content where we were not given a new map to play on, which is just, that's kind of surprising. I'm not sure I'm a fan of that. And then, of course, we have to get to the highly subjective, which is everything about the Trickster. Some love his look, some hate it. I'll give him this, it's memorable. His power is a bit of a bummer because it's not that strong, but it still feels really rough to go up against because sometimes you feel like there's just not much you can do to get away from it. And when I look at it, just in short, this chapter, to me at least, largely depends on how you feel about the Trickster's look and power, though it is somewhat boosted by some fun perks and the always amazing Yunjin Lee. Perhaps I'm being too generous here, but I give this one a B-. After a collection of kind of so-so chapters, we come back in a big way here with the 23rd chapter, Resident Evil, which released June 15th, 2021, and of course came with the Nemesis, Jill Valentine, and Leon Kennedy. It also came with the Raccoon City realm that came equipped with the Raccoon City police station map, which at the time was just a single map, and oh my gosh, no. No, please. Perk-wise, we got Eruption, Hysteria, Lethal Pursuer, Blast Mine, Bite the Bullet, Counterforce, Flashbang, Resurgence, and Rookie Spirit. So, a lot of new perks. Few chapters could be considered, or at least should be considered, as important as the initial Resi chapter. Adding Nemesis, Leon, and Jill to the game was absolutely massive, and by default, this one's going to get at least a decent grade. It also helps that Lethal Pursuer, Hysteria, Blast Mine, Bite the Bullet, and Flashbang were all really cool perks with varying levels of viability, but all undeniably cool. Sadly, I do have to note that there were some real negatives with this chapter as well, like the fact that Eruption spent a decent amount of time as just the scourge of the DBD community and was only somewhat recently fixed. The initial RPD map was also really bad, even though nobody can deny that it was also really beautiful, so at least it had that going for it. And then there was the issue of Jill and Claire's faces, which, how does this happen? They're video game characters. How do you get so far off on their faces? How? Oh, it was rough. It was so rough. And of course, there was the whole thing about console players being just absolutely brutalized by bugs that came with this chapter. So when I look back, yeah, overall it was a positive chapter, no doubt. But I can't overlook the glaring negatives that held this one down for a long time. So I still love that it happened, and I'm glad the issues have been ironed out, but you know, you can't overlook some of the negatives. I give this one a B+, mostly just because of how rough it was on launch. Next, we have the Hellraiser chapter, which again was really a paragraph, but I'm not allowed to say that, so okay, fine. The Hellraiser chapter, which came out September 7th, 2021, and it came with only one character, that being the Cenobite. Two if you count the Chatterer skin, but whatever. No maps with this one, which kind of makes sense because the Labyrinth from Hellbound would have been cool, but probably the right decision here. As far as perks are concerned, we got Deadlock, Hex, Plaything, and really exciting, we got Scourge Hook, Gift of Pain. That's right, this one brought Scourge Hooks to the game. So, when I look at this one, ugh, what a mess. What a mess. I always wanted Pinhead in the game, but now that it's happened, oof, be careful what you wish for, right? On the surface, there are things that I like. I like that Pinhead added a secondary objective to the game. I like the addition of Scourge Hooks. I like that Chatterer is a skin. On the other hand, I hate how Pinhead essentially makes solo queue unbearable, even though yes, that's more of a skill issue on most survivors' parts. Most survivors are very bad, and when you design a killer, you have to know that. I dislike the NFT nonsense around the release of this chapter, even though that wasn't really Behavior's fault. It still was an ugly look. I dislike that a single skin costs more than the entire DLC, and that we're all just apparently cool with that. Overall, this one did some things right, but I really just felt like it brought some awful energy into the game, some really bad energy, and I'm still not exactly excited when I see I've loaded in against a Pinhead. Still, it's not a total wash, and having the Cenobites in the game is cool to see. It's a shame we didn't get a full chapter, but oh well, you take what you can get, and in this case, that means Hellraiser is going to have to take a C. After that, we did this strange thing they keep doing where we followed up one paragraph with another, and the next paragraph was Hour of the Witch, which came out in October of 2021, because again, witches, right? Of course it'd be October. So the character that came out with this one was Michaela Reed, a survivor, and Michaela came with Boon Circle of Healing, Boon Shadow Step, and Clairvoyance. Hour of the Witch, I think, was a bit of a blessing when it came out. Pun fully intended, by the way, because people had been asking for fresh mechanics for a long time, and after Pinhead brought Scourge hooks for killers, Michaela brought boons to spice things up for survivors. And really, that's what I'm mostly grading here, because you look at everything else, Clairvoyance is a pretty forgettable perk, but Shadow Step and Circle of Healing are both rather strong. Circle was too strong for a long time, and while it's fair to argue that it's still really strong, I also think it's fair to say it's in a much better place now. As far as Michaela herself is concerned, a lot of people seem to really like her, but she's just not for me. The Tumblr witch aesthetic isn't my thing, but as I've said a million times over, not every character is going to appeal to every player, so obviously no harm was done here, and if you like her, I think that's awesome. This was a small paragraph that ended up packing a pretty considerable punch, and while I hated Circle for quite a while, I do look back on this one mostly favorably, and because of that, I give it a B. I wish the good times kept rolling, but after that we got Portrait of a Murder, which may actually be, it's in the running for the most underwhelming chapters of all time. It released November 20th, 2021, came out with the artist and Jonah Vasquez. And as far as maps are concerned, we actually not only got a new map, but a new realm entirely, that being the Forsaken Boneyard realm, which came with the Eyrie of Crows map. For perks, we received Grim Embrace, Hex Pentimento, and Scourgehook Pain Resonance for the artist, and then Jonah was equipped with Boon Exponential, Corrective Action, and Overcome. So, this chapter bombed on release, and it hasn't really received much love after the fact. It's not like there's some big community saying, actually guys, I love this chapter. Like, do those people exist? Yes, but they're far and away in the minority. This one just never really seemed to catch on with the audience. And the thing is that, yes, artist is powerful, but many seem put off by the whole W playstyle she enforces. And then Jonah was also a dud. Though I enjoy morally gray characters, so I appreciate what they were going for here. I understand that there's some things, like, one thing I have found, and maybe you guys are going to disagree, the DBD community on a larger scale does not seem to love subtlety, so for whatever reason, it's just like person good or person bad, and that's kind of how they ended up being judged. And I'm talking about characters, by the way, I'm not talking about, like, real human beings, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like Jonah was a cool idea, but for whatever reason, man, the community just really rejected him. And I think part of it was because he just looks kind of like Guy Fieri, doesn't he? Like kind of a strange design. As far as Eyrie of Crows is concerned, it is a visually beautiful map. Nobody can deny that. It is a visually beautiful map that has the small downside of making me want to uninstall the game every time I go there. In particular, it is a brutal map for boons if you're the killer, because they can place their boons up high and you got to go all the way up 2 flights of stairs to go get to the boon. Why would they do this? Why do boons have to work on multiple levels? I hate it. I hate it so much. But yeah, whatever. Exponential and Pentimento are both unique and interesting perks, and I also do like Overcome. I am less warm on Pain Res, though thankfully it's been nerfed and it's not nearly as, I guess, oppressive as it was before. Now there's actually some strategy associated with it, and I think it's a much healthier perk. In short, this one was a clunker of a chapter with some cool ideas baked in, but terrible execution. Unfortunately, I wish I could go better for this one, but I'm gonna give it a D. After that, we got Sadako Rising, which was the Ringu chapter. Obviously, that released in March of 2022. It came with the Onryo and Yoichi Asakawa. No map this time around, but 6 perks, which is kind of the typical number. So they came with Call of Brine, Merciless Storm, Scourge Hook, Floods of Rage, Boon, Dark Theory, Empathic Connection, and Parental Guidance. So Here's the thing. If you had told me we'd have Ringu in DBD before the likes of Alien, Friday the 13th, Predator, Candyman, Child's Play, FNAF, or even something more obscure like Until Dawn, I wouldn't have believed you. And yet here we are with a full-fledged Ringu chapter, and you know what? It's not half bad. Yoichi was a cool choice for the survivor, and I love that he opened the door for more expanded lore types of characters going forward. Sadako looks great and is translated well, though her power does have some major issues, and I can't say she's currently in a great place. Foregoing a map was probably a good call here, though they probably could have given us a prettier, sunnier version of a Yamaoka map, and I would have been interested to see how that went, but I understand why they didn't do that. In short, this was a very, very surprising license acquisition, and while things haven't always been smooth, I'm really happy we have this one. Oh, and as a side note, screw the regression meta, and screw Call of Brine, you stinky, stinky perk. Overall, this one gets a B-. Last year's anniversary chapter, we got Roots of Dread. That came out June 7th, 2022, and it came out with the Dredge, Hadikar, a new realm, by the way, always exciting, this being the Withered Isle realm, which came with the Garden of Joy, which is anything but a joyful place to be, and then it came with the perks Darkness Revealed, Dissolution, Septic Touch, Inner Focus, Overzealous, and Residual Manifest. Before I say anything else about this chapter, you have to give them credit. It was a bold choice to go for an original anniversary chapter after a run of anniversaries that had included Ghostface, Silent Hill, and Resident Evil. But did the boldness pay off? Mostly, I would say. There was the issue of Hattie receiving almost no cosmetics in year one of her existence, and that largely, I mean, that did a lot to kind of hurt her popularity, but that has mostly been remedied. Dredge constantly gets the best skins in the game though, which, I mean, that's great because he's debatably the coolest design they've come up with in ever. And then I think the Dredge's power is strange but mostly enjoyable, and I typically like playing as and against him, even though his little husk ability is kind of unfortunate, or not husk, it's a remnant. His is a remnant. We have so many words for the same things in this game, but his remnant is kind of just another hold W power, so that's a little unfortunate, but the locker teleporting is really cool, even if some maps are just really not going to go well for the Dredge. Hattie has a good character design, though I will note that she's not really bringing much to the table in terms of teachable perks. I guess I like Overzealous, but it's still not great either. And then, of course, we can't talk about this one without talking about the Garden of Joy, which, like so many other maps, it looks great, certainly, but it may be a top 5 worst map in the game. Really, though, I think what they just need to do, like they need to do with so many of these, shrink it down a little bit and remove the God window, and suddenly I'm a lot more favorable towards this map. Either way, even if they did nothing more going forward, I am favorable to this chapter, and I give it a nice B+. I like Roots of Dread. After that, we got Project W, which was, of course, the second Resident Evil chapter. This one, wow, I got a lot to cover here. So, it released August 30th, 2022, and came out with the Mastermind, better known as Albert Wesker, Ada Wong, and Rebecca Chambers. And then, this one was interesting because it didn't really come out with a new map, but what it did was it split the RPD map into an East and West version, which was, admittedly, a pretty good solution that made the maps a lot better to play on. As far as perks, we got Awakened Awareness, Superior Anatomy, and Terminus for Wesker, while Ada and Rebecca brought Better Than New, Hyperfocus, Low Profile, Reactive Healing, Reassurance, and Wiretap. And when I look at this, when I try to put it all together, I think there's quite a bit to like about this one. Despite being so late into the game's life cycle, Project W managed to introduce several useful perks in the form of Wesker's 3, as well as Hyperfocus, Reassurance, and Wiretap. And again, that is really impressive because the longer the game goes on, the harder it's going to be to come up with new useful perks. And then there are the additions of Ada and Rebecca. So I'm not personally a huge Rebecca fan. I mean, she's all right, I'm just not a huge fan. But having Ada in the game is a dream come true, and I really hope we get an RE4 skin soon. As for Wesker, he's a tale of two halves for me. On the positive half, his power is really popular, and his quips are often quite humorous. On the other hand, he is grossly overplayed, and yes, I'm definitely tired of facing him. And then he doesn't really fit with the DBD Rogues gallery, and I know I'm gonna get tomatoes thrown at me for this one, but I'm not sure he was the right choice for the kit he was given. They're gonna call me a gatekeeper, they're gonna say I'm not being fair to him, but I'm just not sure he belongs here. That's my personal opinion. It's weird when you can be chased by, the Trapper, the Dredge, even the Nemesis, and then also the guy from the Matrix. Like, I don't know, that's a bit of a negative for me, even though I do like Wesker as a character, just maybe not in Dead by Daylight. Regarding the RPD updates, they're alright, I guess. They're alright. The maps can still be kind of painful, but things are much better than they used to be. And on the bright side, they're kind of painful for both roles, which if you're going to have a map that makes people cringe, at least make it where both sides kind of cringe instead of one side being like, oh man, oh no, I'm gonna have to work so much harder this time. I'll take what we have over how things were, I guess, but I won't lie and say I necessarily enjoy these maps. I do, again, think they look great though. They're, in fact, they may be the most beautiful maps in the game. They're really, really cool. This chapter did a lot more right than it did wrong, though there were some things I thought were wrong. And overall, I'm going to give this one an A. After that, we got Forged in Fog, and oh man, okay. Let's do the objective part first. So, this one was released November 22nd, 2022. It came with the Knight, Vittorio Toscano, and the decimated Borgo realm, which only came with the map Shattered Square, so another new realm with one map. Perk-wise, we were given Hex, Face the Darkness, possibly the worst hex in the game, question mark. Hubris and Nowhere to Hide, those were on the killer side. And then on the survivor side, we got Fogwise, Potential Energy, and Quick Gambit. So, let's get into this one. Okay. Wow, man. These next two chapters are going to be spicy, right? People have strong opinions about this chapter and the one that followed it. So, I know there are fans of both chapters, but they're both generally regarded pretty poorly, and to be honest, I get it. Knight has an A+ design aesthetically. Who in their right mind wouldn't want a medieval knight that carries a claymore around? Even though the logistics of a Hungarian knight carrying a Scottish claymore, a little strange, but we're gonna look past that. But his power is where he loses people. It's where Tarhos starts to struggle, because Dead by Daylight they've had this whole W power problem for quite a while now, and Knight exemplifies that to a T. And while it's true that players can use Knight in an aggressive way rather than falling back on a rather conservative, safe 3-gen strategy, the problem remains that many hits from the Knight or his guards, they just feel kind of unavoidable, and those are some of the worst kinds of hits. Sadly, I'm of the opinion that the Knight is actually the best thing about this chapter, despite his power. Vittorio is debatably, but likely, my least favorite survivor in the game. We as a community had asked for a survivor from the past for quite some time, but man, they fumbled the bag hard here. Vittorio hails from medieval Italy, and yet he dresses like a suburban dad going through one heck of a midlife crisis. He was created to be handsome and trendy, and honestly, it doesn't work for me, and I'm not here for it. As for the map, the filter is very hard on the eyes, and the whole thing could stand to shrink by 10 to 15% and still be perfectly functional. Still, the Borgo is far from the worst map that we've seen, and I don't know, when I look back at this one, so having wanted a medieval chapter for a long time, this one was just a huge letdown in so many ways. I give it a D+. And if you thought I wasn't a fan of that chapter, alright, our last one here, Tools of Torment, which came out March 7th, 2023. It came out with the Skull Merchant, Talita Lyra, and Hinatu Lyra. It also came out with the Shelter Woods rework, which is the only map I'm going to count as part of it, even though technically 2 other maps were reworked for it. I promise you, for the sake of its grade, you do not want me factoring in Mother's Dwelling. With the perks, we were given Game Afoot, Leverage, and Thwack for the Skull Merchant, and then the survivors were able to give us Background Player, Blood Rush, Cut Loose, Friendly Competition, Teamwork, Collective Healing, and Teamwork Power of 2. Whew. It is going to be hard to be objective at all with this one. Let's start with the good. Talita has a nice character design and already has some quality cosmetics. And I really like the concept, I guess, of sibling survivors with teamwork themed perks. That's cool. I like that quite a lot. As far as map reworks go, the Shelter Woods update is flawed, but generally acceptable and better than what came before. Okay, now, on to the bad. Outside of extremely niche cases, the perks from this chapter are consistently underwhelming. I can only really see myself using Leverage, and even then, it's not amazing. The survivors were particularly robbed here, as they got 6 perks. 6 perks! And none of them are particularly fun. Then there's Hinatu, who has a lot of fans, but if I'm being honest, I don't like his design at all. His tattoos, his face, his pants, none of it works for me, even though I do kind of like the little thing where he seems to play the drums. on his thighs as he's waiting to load into the game. That's kind of fun, so credit for that. And of course, if we're complaining, there is a killer-sized elephant in the room that I have yet to talk about. I hate the Skull Merchant. Like, absolutely hate her. Hate her like I've never hated a DBD character before. Not the nurse, not pre-nerf Spirit, not even Forever Freddy or Infinite Legion. I uniquely hate this character at nearly every fiber of her being. I dislike her Mori. I dislike her lore, though the phrase dark Brazilian manga does make me chuckle. I dislike her aesthetic, which is about as uninspired as I've ever seen from this usually very talented art team. And most of all, I dislike her power. Much like the Knight, she is a 3-gen specialist who possesses the ability to slow games to a crawl. Unlike Knight, I find the vast majority of my Skull Merchant games to be 30-minute slugs, where the killer grinds us down until the only victory available is a Pyrrhic one. I don't like to be overly negative, but believe me when I say I hate this killer, and I rue the day she was added to the roster. Worst yet is that after releasing the Merchant, they made her the focus of the next tome, meaning I still see Skull Merchant more frequently than 90% of the killer roster. I hope I don't seem overly dramatic with this, but friends, I kinda want to quit the game right now. I'm not having nearly as much fun, and this killer she is the largest part of that. Her games, I mean, my gosh, she is miserable to play against. And unlike Nurse, Spirit, or Blight, her miserable games last several lifetimes, whereas the others tend to wipe teams out pretty quickly, so at least you can move on to the next one. Maybe I just need a break. Maybe the anniversary chapter will reel me back in. But for the time being, Adriana has kind of broken my love for DBD, and that's a really disappointing thing to realize. There's good in this chapter, and some people love it, but I'd be lying to myself if I gave this crap anything higher than what it deserves. So unfortunately, I'm going to give Tools of Torment an F. And wow. That was a bit of a downer to end on, wasn't it? I really wish that I had put this off until after the anniversary chapter, assuming that the anniversary chapter is really awesome, so I could have ended it on some kind of high note about, oh, but I'm so excited for the future of the game, which I am. I am. I hope they really get things on track, but it goes without saying that Dead by Daylight has hit on far more of its chapters than it's missed on, and I'm thankful for all of the wonderful experiences I've had in the fog. Grades are naturally highly subjective, and I know people are going to disagree strongly with my grades in several areas, so either way, I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I hope we can keep things civil in the comments down below. As a parting challenge, I'd love to know which chapters you guys would give A+ or Fs to. Did I use those grades too frequently, too sparingly? Let me know. As always, comment down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, consider becoming a member if you really want to help the channel out some and get some exclusive perks, and until next time, I've been DasFood. Bye friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase.